This video is brought to you by Sailrite. Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this video, we'll show you how to sew up your own Keystone cushion for a powerboat's Forward Berth Cabin. The cushion cover will incorporate a piping trim around the top edge. This cushion has a backer board, and it fits between other cushions to provide more sleeping room, or, when it's removed, more standing room. This cushion project is part of Sailrite's 2016 project boat on the Regal Ambassador. This cushion will be attached to a backer board, so no zippers will be used. The cover will simply be slipped over the foam with the backer board on the underside, and the cover will be stapled to the backer board. We have already patterned the Dura Skrim pattern material in a previous video. If you'd like to see that process, click the link here. Let's get started. Here's Cindy, a professional seamstress with Sailrite, to walk us through the process.
We're ready to do the Keystone cushion for Brian's boat, and we made this pattern when we made all the other patterns. This piece is actually a piece of foam laid on top of a backer board because it needs the support of the board. So we're going to use our pattern to cut our top plate and our foam from. Okay, I would like to match the Keystone, the pattern on the fabric in the Keystone also. So I'm going to find a place in this area that's predominant and easy to measure. So I'm going to choose at the bottom of this little triangle and measure down to my seam 2 5/8 inches. So I'll find the same place on my fabric over here, and there's that same triangle. So I'll measure down 2 5/8 inches and put a pin. And my seam allowance needs to be 1/2 inch above that. I have the center marked on the Keystone, and here's the center of the pattern. So I'm going to put the center there, and then I'm going to slide it up so that I'm in the middle of those two pins, because I want to add 1/4 inch to my pattern before I cut it. So I'm going to start right there. And that will make my pattern continuous from the Keystone to this cushion. So I've got this laid in the center, and you can see that I'm right in between these two areas of the print on the fabric. And here's where we stitched on this original cushion on the center also. So the center will continue. From here all the way down.
The Dura Skrim pattern material will now be pinned at its appropriate spot on the decorative fabric. This Geobella fabric marks well with the fabric marking pencil yellow. She'll trace around the pattern material, keeping that line 1/4 inch from the edge of the pattern material, so our plate is 1/4 inch larger than the Dura Skrim pattern material. Now we can cut it out, either with a hot knife or with scissors. Here she's cutting on top of the line she just struck down. Here she's cutting where there is no line struck out, so she's just using the scissors and cutting 1/4 inch away from the edge of the pattern material. It's your choice. To determine the width of the boxing, we need the foam. We haven't cut that yet, so we're going to use a scrap piece of foam that's equal to our foam width.
Now, to determine the size that we need to cut our boxing, I'm going to lay this scrap piece of foam on here, which is 4 inches, and measure the board along with the foam, which is 4 3/4 inches. So I need a seam of 1/2 inch. That makes it 5 1/4, and then I want to allow about 2 inches to pull down underneath. So I'm going to cut this at 7 1/4.
Along the front, the boxing will be visible, so we want to match the patterns.
And when I cut the front boxing, I'd also like it to match across or down and around the front of the cushion. So to find where I need to cut my boxing to match that, I'm going to put a pin 1/2 inch in, because that's where my seam will be, and then another pin right where that one is on the underneath piece where I'll cut my boxing. And then I need a 1/2 inch seam added to that. So I'm going to cut right here and measure down from that cut my 7 1/4 inches. But to make sure my boxing's straight, I'm looking at this little area right here and the same area on this pattern. and that's my top line.
Here, Cindy's using the clear acrylic ruler to measure down the boxing width. For us, it's 7¼ inches. Then she strikes a few marks and then strikes through the marks with the clear acrylic ruler, making 2 strips of boxing that will hopefully go around our Keystone cushion.
Okay, you can see here where these 2 pieces are going to match when we stitch them together. We need to go to the machine and stitch our bias cording onto this, and I'm going to start that off to the side here rather than at the top.
In a previous video, we showed how to make piping using a decorative fabric. If you'd like to watch a portion of that video, click this link here and it will direct you to that video. Using that piping, we'll sew it to the perimeter of this plate. You may have noticed we did not sew about 3 inches of the beginning portion of the piping, because at that point we'll need to join the opposite end of the piping together there. Here at the corner, a clip was made to help the piping take the turn, and the presser foot was lifted with the needle buried in the fabric. Then the presser foot was lowered, and Cindy continues to sew. The flange or tail of the piping was made to equal the seam allowance, for us 1/2 inch. Again, at the corners, a clip or 2 is made, the needle buried where we want to make the turn, the presser foot lifted, the fabric turned, presser foot lowered, and then continue to sew. When the end is reached where we started to sew, we will stop sewing, and now we need to join the piping together. To do that, we will cut the excess off, leaving about 2 to 3 inches extra. Open up the piping cover, cutting a few stitches, and then cutting off the piping cord so it's flush with the other. Then we'll fold the excess fabric back along the bias, lay the other piping inside of it, push the cover back over, and continuing to sew until we sew a few inches over the previous stitches. Up next, we'll sew the boxing to the plate.
This is the piece that I want to match to my top plate so that the pattern matches, but I'm going to need more than that to go all the way around this cushion. So before I start putting this piece on, I'm going to add this piece to it. This one doesn't have to match anything, it'll never be seen. So I'm going to seam this together before I apply this to the cushion with the seam stick.
To join those 2 strips of boxing together, the outside surfaces are facing each other. Then a stitch is placed near the end, approximately 1/2 inch away, reversing at the beginning and at the end to lock the stitch in place. We often like to use seam stick 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas when we have a pattern that needs to be matched up. And along the front of this Keystone cushion, our boxing needs to match, or the pattern on the boxing needs to match the plate. So this basting tape will help us to pre-baste everything in place, so when we take it to the sewing machine, everything matches. Now, is that necessary all around the perimeter of the cushion? No, not at all. But it's also a very time-saving feature in that you can pre-baste the entire boxing around the plate and then quickly take it to the sewing machine and sew around it, not having to worry about positioning anything or something stretching more than the other. Here you can see the pattern matches beautifully. Since we're basting all the way around, we can slit the corners because we know where they're going to fall. So here Cindy puts 2 stitches in the corner, not going deeper than our seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch. Then she peels off the 1/4 inch basting tape along the opposite side and bastes it in place, making sure all raw edges are as even as possible. She'll do that all around the perimeter of the cushion until she reaches the end where it needs to be joined together. Here we've skipped ahead to where the ends need to be joined together, so watch what she does here. A slit or 2 is made at the corner, not going deeper than 1/2 inch. The basting tape is taken up, but not where the boxing needs to be joined together. It could be taken up all the way, but this just makes it easier so it doesn't stick by accident. She'll baste the corner, baste up to where she cut the transfer paper off of the basting tape, and then she determines approximately where it needs to be cut to join the ends of the boxing together.
And I'm just going to cut off some of this extra fabric so it's not so much in the way when I do this seam. And then after I stitch around the cushion from this edge back to here, then I'll sew this seam together and finish it.
4 to 6 inches of the boxing is not sewn here at the beginning point where it needs to be joined together. We start sewing here and sew around the perimeter just as we did with anything else. The Sailrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine has a cording or welting tunnel built into the standard foot. If you're using a home sewing machine for cushions, you may need to install a cording foot to sew this application. To make a turn at this corner, Cindy buries the needle, pivots the fabric around, lowers the presser foot, and then walks the sewing machine by hand stitch or two because that corner wasn't exactly where she wanted it. Then she continues to sew under power again. We've skipped ahead, and here's where the boxing needs to be joined together. She stops about 6 inches from that junction point.
So I've stopped in the area where I didn't take the seam stick off, so I have enough room to work here. And I put those two right up against each other so that this area is nice and smooth and make a clip, and that's where my seam will be, in that area.
Pins will be used to join those two halves together prior to sewing. Since this boxing is rather wide, we'll use 3 pins. 1 in the center, 2 on the edges. Then we'll sew through that location where she clipped the fabric, reversing at the beginning and the end to lock our stitch in place.
Use this as my guide and stitch from here to this little clip.
You can easily sew over the pins. Just be sure not to sew over the ends of the pin where there's a plastic head. The excess can be trimmed off. Be sure you leave at least a 1/2 inch tail. Now we can join the rest of the boxing to the plate.
And I can finish this seam.
We won't do any reversing here. We'll just start a few inches on top of our previous stitches and end a few inches on top of our first stitches. Up next, we'll cut our foam. We'll show you 2 ways, using a professional foam cutter and an electric kitchen knife. Using the pattern we made previously, which was shown in a different video, we're going to trace around it approximately a 1/4 inch larger than the pattern. So our foam is a 1/4 inch larger than the pattern. That 1/4 inch is added to all sides. Sailrite sells a few different types of professional foam cutters. This is the AccuCutter 350. It has a flat base that runs along the table, keeping the cut nice and straight along the edge. Next, we're going to show an electric kitchen knife that you can purchase almost anywhere. You do have to be diligent about holding the blade so that it's perfectly straight, but it makes beautiful cuts in any of the foams that Sailrite sells.
Okay, we have our foam cut to apply to the board, and I'm going to put the cushion or the foam into the cushion.
Some cushions with backer boards are seldom removed, so worrying about what the bottom side looks like is not too important. However, for this application, the Keystone will be removed occasionally, and the owner wants the backside to look somewhat finished. So the next chapter will highlight not only stapling it in place, but also trying to give it a somewhat finished look.
Before I attach my cushion to the board, I'm going to cut a piece of cushion underlining to lay on the board to finish off the bottom edge of it, because you'll be able to see the bottom edge of this one. And I'm going to cut it the same size as my pattern.
Here's a close-up view of the cushion underlining material.
Okay, since we used our pattern for the top plate for this cushion underlining, it's a little bit too big. So I'm going to trim about 3/4 of an inch off all the way around.
The goal here is to give the bottom side a finished look. We will staple the cushion underlining to the backer board. Then we will pull the decorative cover we just made in place and staple it around the sides, keeping the staples close to the raw edge of the cover fabric, about a 1/2 inch away. Why? In the next step, we will cover that fabric edge and the majority of staples in that edge with Hightem gimp. See Cindy's hand go in between the cover and the foam? What she's doing there is trying to keep that 1/2 inch seam going the direction of the boxing rather than sitting on top of the plate. You can hear that we have a leak, not with the staple gun, but with the actual connection between the hose and the staple gun. We did not fix it for this video, however we should have. Then she pulls the fabric fairly taut around the foam and over the backer board so that the cover looks good. Do not pull it so tight that it causes wrinkles or hard spots. We want it to be firm, but yet not so firm that wrinkles are caused. And you need to apply even pressure around the entire cushion cover while you're stapling it. Try to keep the staples in line, because in the future step we will use Hightem gimp to hide the raw edge of fabric and also the line of staples if they are in line. Sailrite sells the EZE TC08 staple gun in both a long nose and standard nose version. This is a pneumatic staple gun, and it's excellent for fabric applications and upholstery applications like this. The 1/2 inch crown definitely helps when working with fabrics where staples will sometimes be pulled through the fabric, like on vinyl applications. So the 1/2 inch crown is an added bonus for the staple gun. Watch as Cindy tries to create a beautiful looking corner by folding the fabric in to create a single fold at each of the corners. That looks great. It's now time to hide that raw edge and the line of staples with Hightem gimp.
We're going to apply the Hightem gimp around this edge to cover up this area where I've stapled this on, because you'll see the bottom of this cushion. So to do that, I just open it up and put the stapler inside.
When we reach a turn, there are 3 ways a turn can be completed. One is to force the Hightem gimp around the turn, as we're doing here. But that does leave a little bit of wrinkles because the fabric has to stretch on the outside and shrink on the inside turn. This is one approach. The second way is to cut an inside portion of the Hightem gimp around the inside of the turn, basically a triangle. The outer edge has to shrink, so the triangle will obviously help with the shrinkage because there's no fabric there that needs to shrink. However, the outer edge needs to stretch. So a staple will be inserted along the outer edge to help it to sit down flat. It's not perfect, but it is the second way to round a corner using Hightem gimp. And the final approach at each corner, this is also where the Hightem gimp joins itself, is to cut each strip and then line it up so that it looks good along each length. Our Keystone cushion with backer board is now complete. How to make the starboard and port cushion will be shown in a separate video, also the bow cushion up front. Be sure to check those out as well. Coming up is the materials list and tools that we use to make this Keystone cushion with a backer board. You can purchase all these supplies and fabrics at Sailrite. Coming soon, we will complete more videos covering the construction of a few more of the cushions for this forward berth area. Check them out at Sailrite.com or our YouTube channel. It's your loyal patronage to Sailrite that makes these free videos available. Thanks for your loyal support. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.